Beth was horrified at the thought of having to convince others that she was in love with Ted. Surely that would mean being affectionate with him at some point. Having to look at Ted in a loving way might be more than she could handle. Ted was a nice guy and all, but so was she, wasn't she? Deep down, Beth felt like she was drowning in a pool of mixed-up emotions with no way out. When they arrived at the hospital, a police cruiser was parked outside the main admitting area, along with several local media vans. Ted got out and went in, telling Beth to stay while he brought out a wheelchair for her. "But I can walk," she protested. "Yeah, but I don't want you getting held up by the media asking questions. This way, you have no control as I whisk you past them. We need to avoid getting questioned until we're more settled in our roles," Ted explained. "Oh. Right," Beth agreed, feeling nervous. Ted was only gone a couple of minutes, but to Beth, it seemed longer. She felt exposed being in the car alone and realized how much she missed Ted's support and reassurance. Trying to get herself into a female mindset, she used that need for Ted to try and see him as her partner to overcome her reluctance to act out her role. Ted got her settled in the chair, even opening the door and giving her a hand, even though she didn't require it. "Appearances," was Ted's only comment when she asked. They had to wait at reception while some forms were filled out. Beth insisted that no blood tests be taken and that she didn't require a full examination, much to the doctor's surprise. She signed the form, which seemed to be accepted. Her practice emulating Beth's signature had paid off. The media had spotted her but had let her finish her paperwork before starting to ask questions. Ted fended off most of them, saying Beth was semi-amnesiac over most of her ordeal. The media settled for some photos and Beth's assurance that she felt fine, apart from some memory gaps. Beth noticed an officer in the reception. He didn't approach them, but she got the impression he was there because of her. She whispered to Ted just before they came to take her x-ray about it, and he nodded, saying he'd seen him back at the plant. An hour later, the results came back with nothing to show, at least nothing abnormal. Ted was happy that his friend showed no skull damage, but Beth felt disappointed. Normal meant nothing to cure, no magic hey presto back to being a man switch. Having to continue the lie was draining. Every gesture, every act, every smile had to be perfectly executed despite inner reservations, to give the appearance of two people in love. Ted had kissed her and told her he loved her when they separated just before heading into the x-ray. Beth had smiled back and acted like being kissed by Ted was the only thing she lived for. She had noticed the way Ted's eyes had sparkled when she made herself say she loved him too. He drove her home, to Beth's home that is, and asked if she wanted him to stay for a while. Beth wanted to be alone to sort out her conflicted feelings and so told Ted it was okay. Ted started to leave, promising to pick her up in the morning on the way to work. Beth put Maggie down and let her explore her new surroundings before questioning Ted. "Work? What about the damage at the plant?" "We have no work now," protested Beth. "While you were lying down on the job and x-ray, I got a call on my mobile phone," he joked. "Apparently, we will be reporting to the office in the morning and will be reassigned to the sister plant near Flaxton." "Crap, that's another extra 40 miles away," snorted Beth. "I suppose we could carpool." "I mean, I'm only 10 minutes away from you, and you're on my way," suggested Ted. "Anyway, I'll have to take you tomorrow. Beth's car is still in the car park at the plant." "Oh. I hadn't thought of that. I suppose everything she owned is mine now, at least for the interim," Beth mused speculatively. "I'm going to enjoy driving her sporty little Miata." "It's not big, but almost brand new, isn't it?" she asked. "Yeah, about a year old," confirmed Ted. "At least it's a step up from your clunker," Ted laughed. "Hey! I'll have you know that clunker is a classic," Beth insisted with mock indignation. "A classic example of a mobile rust bucket, if you ask me," snorted Ted. "Well, I'm off back to the plant to see if I can find some residue of the polymer if it hasn't been cleaned up. We might get more answers from that directly, seeing only we know of its importance. Okay, I'm going to familiarize myself here and see what other assets I have. Oh! If Beth has a computer, I might see about transferring some of my money into Beth's account before it gets tied up with inheritance taxes," Beth went on. Okay, I'll let you know if I find anything. Bye. Ted gave her a peck on the cheek before she could protest and turned to leave her standing there with her hands slowly rising to touch where he'd kissed her. Shrugging off the momentary confusion, she went exploring. Being treated as a female was starting to affect the way she reacted. Sighing in resignation at having to deal with the feminine responses she was beginning to return, she decided to look around for an accordion file containing Beth's important papers to check her bank statements. Finding a top-of-the-line laptop in a cozy study, she did some credit checks on Beth's accounts. After 10 minutes, she sat back and whistled. No wonder she could afford a new car and owned this place outright. She was loaded. Looking back in the records for deposits and expenditures, she saw that about a year ago, a large sum of money had been deposited in her account, around $1.5 million. Sitting back, thinking, Beth seemed to recall that Beth had taken some time off due to a family bereavement. Beth wasn't sure of the details but faintly remembered something about her parents being in an accident. Maybe this money was from a life insurance payout. Beth made a mental note to ask Ted about it. She could see withdrawals for the car and one possibly for the house, and there was still over $985,000 left. A horrible thought went through her mind. What if Ted knew of this windfall and had been motivated by greed to resurrect Beth to get hold of the money? Then reason came back and squashed that idea. Ted had still been dating Beth well after that money was received. If he was only interested in the money, why would he then break up with her? Reassured of Ted's integrity, she hit the keyboard again. Deciding against transferring her small funds out of her old account, seeing it wasn't really needed, she searched through the personal items left from the real Beth's life. Letters were found and read, and any correspondence from clubs and friends was carefully scrutinized, with key facts to be memorized and jotted down on paper. Hunger started her stomach rumbling, and looking at the time, she was shocked to realize most of the day had gone by. She had even missed lunch, so engrossed had she been. Feeling she knew enough about the real Beth's life to muddle through, she started looking through the kitchen for something to eat. Maggie joined Beth in her search for food, grumbling in displeasure at being ignored for so long. Sorry, Maggie, I'll see what I can find for you, Beth apologized, placing a bowl with some milk in it for the kitten in the interim. Maru, Maggie replied, licking hungrily at the bowl. Beth looked through the pantry and cupboards to inventory the contents. Finding no cat food, she sighed and sacrificed a can of salmon for the kitten to eat. The fridge yielded a nice surprise, a casserole ready to be cooked. It was probably going to be the real Beth's meal that she never had the chance to eat. Feeling sad for the dead woman, whose life she had so recently supplanted, she carried the casserole to the oven to be cooked, knowing that, dead or not, the real Beth would hate to see the last meal she had made wasted. While that was cooking, and seeing Maggie was happy, Beth had a look around the house. She checked the bedroom and opened the closets to see her new clothes. Inside were some of the most elegant clothes Beth had seen, stylish and in good taste. Even with her inexperience with women's apparel, Beth could tell they were quality garments. Leaving the clothes for a moment, she checked out her drawers. One interesting thing caught her eye nestled among the frillies of the underwear. She picked it up, checking to see if it worked, before setting it aside for later. Vowing to put on a little fashion show for herself later, she looked in the bathroom adjoining the bedroom. The jacuzzi was a surprise, no doubt a recent addition, she thought. Having money was nice for the creature comforts, Beth thought enviously, before realizing with a grin that it was her money now. Maggie entered the room and started brushing up against her stocking-covered legs as she wove her feline body between her feet. Picking Maggie up, Beth started stroking the inquisitive kitten as she wandered to check out the rooms she hadn't been in yet. Accompanied by the throaty purring sound, Beth discovered the extent of her home. The oven timer interrupted her inspection of a photo album she had found in the lounge. Checking the dinner to see if it was ready, she got herself a glass of red wine from the wet bar in one corner of the lounge. She served a generous portion of the beef casserole for herself and took it, along with the wine, into the lounge to eat while checking the news on the television. The casserole was great, and she sent up a silent prayer to Beth for preparing it. She saw herself on the television in a segment about the explosion and its aftermath. Beth thought she looked pretty good, even in the dress she'd been found in. Beth wondered if she was going to get calls from people who had known her, and she worried how she was going to handle it. Like she'd triggered a psychic call with her thoughts, the phone began to ring. "Hello?" Beth answered, unsure of who was calling. "Beth? Oh honey, I just saw the news item." "Are you okay?" came an unfamiliar voice on the other end. Beth's heart sank. The caller neglected to name herself, probably assuming Beth recognized her. Thinking fast, Beth answered the caller. "Not really, some of my memories seem scrambled. I find I have huge blanks until something triggers the memory, like a name or a keyword," Beth offered by way of explanation. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. You do know who I am, right? Well, I was wondering if you wanted to cancel out of our aerobics class this week." Seeing you were hurt and all, the still unknown caller continued. "Yes, I will, I think. I want to take things easy for a while, until I get back on my feet. Please call me again next week, Susan," Beth answered, with a sigh of relief, as she found the caller's name written in Beth's meticulously kept appointment book that she had quickly thumbed through. "I'm really sorry to hear that Colin died. I know you respected him. It's a tragic loss. Well, I'm glad to see you survived. I'll call you again, okay?" Susan said as she said goodbye. "Bye," Beth said before hanging up the phone, only to have it ring again as soon as the handset hit the cradle. Several more calls came in that evening, mostly from coworkers who hadn't realized she'd been caught in the explosion and needed to be rescued. Luckily, she'd recognized their names and fielded off some of the more personal questions, using fatigue as a reason to cut the calls short. One thing she noted with hope was that none of them seemed to notice anything odd about her. She knew her voice wasn't a perfect match. Ted had managed to get it sounding similar to Beth's, although she thought it sounded slightly huskier, which made it even sexier, in her opinion. But she could explain that away as being the effects of the fumes from the explosion, if anyone asked. She became used to talking as a woman, even including some of the expressions Beth often used. It became easier to speak like the real Beth the more she spoke. By the end of the phone calls, speaking in a normal female voice hardly seemed strange anymore. The final call was from Ted, saying he had found something that had been overlooked, but he would talk more about it in the morning. Beth found an empty cardboard box and placed a bath mat inside for Maggie to sleep in, before leaving it in the laundry. She then spread some newspapers on the floor for Maggie. Giving the kitten a last snuggle, she put her in the box and closed the door, before heading up to her bedroom. Looking at the wardrobe, she sighed. She was too tired to do the fashion show she had promised herself. Undressing and putting her dirty clothes in the laundry hamper, she walked into the bathroom. "I do have time for that," she thought, as she saw the jacuzzi. Filling it, she then found some scented oils, which she decided to try. "Hell, I may as well enjoy myself while I can," she argued silently. Getting in was heavenly. She laid back and let the jets pulse water on her weary body. Cleaning herself with some luxury soap, she felt fairly contented. She made the effort to get out before the water pruned her skin and plucked a warm fluffy towel from the heated towel rail. She'd shampooed her hair and spent 10 minutes getting it nice and dry with her hairdryer. The perm that had been put in that day made it bounce back to its full glory, for which Beth was grateful. Slipping into a peach-colored nightie, she slipped into bed with a sigh. Slumber wasn't long in coming, and her dreams that night were visually rich. Maggie, feeling she wanted company, headed toward the sleeping Beth. Closed doors were no match for her new abilities, and soon she was curled up in her favorite spot, Beth's body. Morning found her up early, knowing she had to find a suitable outfit for the day. Thinking back, she recalled a nice outfit Beth had worn several weeks ago. Eventually, she located it in the multitude of clothes she now owned. Putting it aside for the moment, she made herself a quick breakfast dressed only in a bra and panties covered by a translucent robe in pink. Just as she had finished and was about to go get dressed, a knocking on her door was heard. Looking through the peephole, she saw it was Ted, so she opened it not thinking about how she was dressed. Ted's eyes popped as he drank in her loveliness. "Quick, kiss me like you mean it," Ted demanded, as he leaned in and kissed her on the lips. He held her tight, keeping his mouth on hers. She was shocked, but resistance didn't seem an option as he swept her inside. "Sorry about that, but have you seen that car parked across the road?" "Huh. "What car?" was Beth's flustered reply as she tried to look out over Ted's shoulder through the still half-open door. "Don't do that," Ted cried. "There's a guy watching us, most likely an undercover cop," Ted speculated. "One thing for sure, he really copped an eyeful in that outfit you're hardly wearing," laughed Ted. "Do you usually answer the door in a see-through robe that shows off everything?" He raised an eyebrow. "Only since I got this body, and had someone to show it off to," Beth said without thinking. She then blushed crimson as the import of her words sank in. "I said that, I don't believe I said that," thought a stunned and embarrassed Beth. "I as much said I did this just for Ted. Honey, you can show it off to me anytime. It's a beautiful body, almost ashamed to hide it under clothes," Ted said fervently. With that, he gave her another kiss on the mouth, this time allowing her the option of pulling away. Beth had automatically closed her eyes, as if trying not to see who she was kissing, when Ted slowly slipped his lips between hers. It stayed there, uncertain whether to proceed, slipping back and forth along her lips. Beth didn't pull away, although her mind was yammering that she was kissing another man. What was worse was the stirrings she felt inside her, making her more distracted. She felt the urgent need to do something about it, but what? Thoughts of the vibrator in her drawer came to mind, seeing as a quick escape wasn't an option. Ted's lips started to probe against her teeth, seeking entry. Beth opened her mouth wider, allowing access to this inquisitive stranger. Her reluctance was fading as the feelings in her body told her to accept. Then, with a sudden burst of awareness, part of the dwindling Colin resurfaced, long enough for the bemused Beth to break the kiss off. She didn't say anything lest her churning thoughts betrayed her, as she smiled and made her way back to get dressed. Ted followed behind, seemingly drawn to her, like a bee after honey. He stopped as she went into her bedroom and belatedly called out through the now-closed door. "Oh! I got some cat food on the way over for Maggie. I knew you wouldn't have any in the house." "Great, thanks. Oh, can you feed her now, please? I'm not leaving her here alone, so I need to have her finish her meal before we go," Beth called back. Ted went and opened the food for the kitten and thought about Beth's on-off reaction to him as he watched the kitten feed. He was delighted with her acceptance of his kisses, but sometimes she just pulled back like it was unpleasant. It was hard to think of her as Colin as she looked, sounded, and for the most part, reacted like a woman. Oh! Crap, he suddenly remembered, she was Colin. She wasn't a real woman, just an excellent copy. Her body wasn't full of the right hormones that would be triggering the correct responses to a normal male/female situation. Considering who she'd been a few days ago, he was surprised she hadn't kicked him in the balls at his attentions. He knew fear of discovery could account for some of it, to maintain the role in front of others. Yet when he'd kissed her just now, it had only been the two of them. Maybe, just maybe there was a spark growing between them. Knowing they had been friends for a long time as males might be carrying on over to this new role. He secretly hoped so. Having her back in my life has been wonderful, he thought. Ted wished he could help her some way. Maybe hormones might do the trick, but she'd never commit to that. All she wanted was her male body back, thought Ted sadly. His mental ruminations were interrupted when she walked in. Dressed in a smart red suit, she looked gorgeous, and Ted's knees turned to water as he gazed at her in rapt amazement. Her skirt was just above the knees and her white blouse had set off the jacket to perfection. Red pumps enclosed her feet, covered in beige stockings that glistened up her legs. Holding a white clutch purse and accessorized with a plain gold necklace and gold-ringed earrings, she looked anything but what she really was deep inside. "Well, do I pass?" she asked with a curious smile as she did a pirouette. "Pass? You're so far ahead of the others, it's a no contest," offered Ted. Beth smiled, which made her even more beautiful in Ted's eyes. Happy that she could take the compliment without feeling she was less a person and more an object, she picked up the cat, before Ted could say something to spoil the mood. Beth gracefully accepted Maggie, who immediately started purring. As she walked towards the front door, which Ted was holding open for her, she quickly checked herself in the mirror hanging in the entryway. Satisfied her hair and light application of makeup were fine, she allowed Ted to lock the door behind her. The car across the road was gone when they drove off, but they both suspected it wouldn't be the last of the police surveillance yet. Beth, remembering one of her questions, quizzed Ted about what he knew of the original Beth's finances. Well, she had a windfall a while ago. You know her parents were killed in an accident? At her nod, he continued. Apparently, some rich dude was driving under the influence when he ran Beth's parents off the road. The court settlement was considerable, so I heard. Why are you asking? Is there something wrong? I thought you were going to check all that. Oh, I did. I mean, she has a nice tidy sum in the bank, and the car and house are paid off. It's a pity she didn't get to spend it all. Beth answered, getting as muddled as Ted with who was who. Then you'll just have to force yourself to do it for her, he laughed. Oh, I nearly forgot to tell you what I found at the plant. I asked if I could examine the place to see if I could find out the cause of the explosion. They finally relented, seeing I was one of the experts. I also checked the computer readouts before the telemetry failed. Seeing Beth was listening without interrupting, he went on. Beth had turned the reaction up by a factor of 4. Shit! No wonder it blew, Beth exclaimed. Yeah. Anyway, the reaction overloaded the system and ignited some of the gases that the heat produced. Looking at what remains, I'd say the exploding vat incinerated Beth instantly, leaving very little. The center vat then tore up the vats on either side, rupturing them and allowing the contents to mix. There was one part of her that I found, but I can't explain the way it looks. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing.